Hello there. Welcome to episode 15 of Bow and Blade, a podcast brought to you by medievalist.net, your home for all things medieval on the internet. Bow and Blade gives you a seat at the bar as scholars of medieval warfare go beyond the Wikipedia articles to talk about the debates and the questions that we're working on today. I'm Michael Livingston, professor at the Citadel, the Military College of South Carolina.
And I'm Kell DeVries, professor of history at Loyola University, Maryland. Glad to be here today. We're both heading off to Europe in a couple of weeks.
Soon now. I'm very excited. You excited?
Yeah, I'm quite excited. I've been there since I was there at Christmas, or at New Year's, so at least I have been back. But I'm anxious to get back, get to the conferences that they've been postponed every year so far.
Yeah, it's gonna be really awesome to see people. And look, if any of you are listening and want to say hi, don't be shy. Like come say hi. We don't bite. Kelly bites.
Yeah, sometimes.
But it's only if you deserve it. So just just don't deserve it, and you're fine.
That's
right.
It's not just don't deserve it. That's good. That works. Don't deserve it.
It is.
Geez, I've got a list now of people I have to go bite.
Now that you mention it, I know some people. It's a special episode because it is our third episode Q&A. So this is episode 15, but we're doing every fifth episode. As long as you guys keep sending us questions, every fifth episode we're doing a Q&A, and this is our third one. And wow, y'all sent in some wicked.
There are some wicked questions. And of course, the first question is, what you drinking tonight?
What am I drinking tonight? Look, I'm celebrating a little bit.
Yeah, justly so.
I'm celebrating.
Justly so. Hold on, let's get a drum beat.
Oh,
all right.
So so today, as we're recording this, now when people are hearing this, it'll be a few days old or whatever. But as we're recording this today, my new book on the Battle of Crecy was released in the UK. Came out in the US, I think, 2 days ago. So I'm excited. I'm celebrating. And I'm celebrating in the most awesome way, which is I'm having myself some super good a Pinot Noir.
Oh, there we go.
I love a good Pinot, and it felt right. It felt right. Little French action. I thought about a Chateauneuf de Pape. As well, because I have very fond memories of Chateauneuf de Pape. As people would know if they've listened to some other stuff, or a Côte de Rhône. Man, that's probably really what I should be having as a Côte de Rhône, given the Côte de Rhône that you and I had there when we figured out.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
What about you, sir?
Well, I'm going because of one of the questions, which will come up fairly early in the show. I'm going with a good Burgundy. I'm okay with good Burgundy. I mean, good dark red, bloody looking Burgundy.
Justly so.
Yeah, I think so.
Justly so.
But yes, congratulations. Those of you who have not did not know how many books is this year so far, Mike?
I'm having an off year. This is my first of
the year.
I only have two coming out this year. Yeah, last year I had 4.
Next one's coming out soon. Yes, Crecy, the Battle of Five Kings. Osprey has produced it. It's a good looking book, as well as
good looking book.
as well as having writing in it that's pretty good too. So.
Well, I hope so. But yeah, it is fun when the book comes and you get the physical copy and you're looking at it and you're like, that's a good looking book. So yeah, Osprey did a great job. So I'm really proud of it. Hoping it's doing. It's actually the #1 new release in medieval military history and in French history today. So I don't know what my competition is.
I don't know, but there's a lot of people crossing the channel right now to buy it from France.
So anyway, go buy my book, y'all.
Yeah, absolutely. I got a little bit smaller announcement. My in a collection on 1522, the Siege of Rhodes, that has just come out by Rutledge. I have the article in it that is how Suleiman won, the tactics and technology that Suleiman used to defeat the city of Rhodes in 1522. We're going to have to
And
do
it's also a beautiful one.
Rhodes coming up sometime.
Yes,
We
we
have
are.
done
Yes, we are.
1480,
Because
but
the
we
big
need to do
anniversary.
1522.
Yeah.
This being the 500th anniversary. I know it's on your calendar.
Yeah, I actually imagine we'll probably do that before our next Q&A. We'll probably do that Siege of Rhodes. It'd be a great time to do that. Yeah, it's a great piece you wrote, and it's that's another beautiful book. Routledge makes a beautiful book.
They do. So, a little more expensive because
yes, a little
but
bit.
Not a trade publication. It's more of an academic one. So
more of an academic one, but it's good stuff.
It is good stuff.
And yeah, like we're saying, y'all send us some awesome questions, some really good ones, and I don't know. Should we just get it started?
Yeah, let's get it started. I mean, these we've had some themes the last two times, it seems. This one's, we've got tactics, we've got technology, we've got leadership. So let's go on them.
All right. So the first one that we'll answer here is from Nosey Historian, which is fantastic.
Yeah, well, every historian should be nosy.
I know, aren't we all? Like, I don't know who you are. That's like just saying anonymous. When assessing and thinking about a 10th century shield wall, say, for example, at Brunanburh, I always think about how under such intense conditions of blocking and thrusting and such, that it mustn't have taken long for a soldier on the front line to deplete their energy. I want to know if there is evidence to suggest that there was a system in place for rotating soldiers out of the front line to replace them with a fresh pair of hands. For battles that last for hours, I just don't think it's possible to sustain fighting energy. Yeah. So, all right. So a couple things. All right. We know from sources that shoving shield walls happened. That kind of smashing of the walls and the pushing back and forth. That we know that happened. But as Nosey Historian nosily notes, it's hard to imagine the kind of stamina necessary for them to engage in that for a long period of time. And sources also tell us that would happen, right? And Brunanburh is a great example of that, where our sources say that this was all day. My sense, and look, you can disagree with me on this, Kelly. My sense is that the essential point of the shield wall is to create a defensive position. That is the first goal of the defensive or of the shield wall, is to keep your dudes, keep yourself in one piece. And so you would make an initial shield wall, and then from this you're going to attack your enemy in the most safe way that you can possible. You have spears, you have stuff you can take, throw or shoot over the shield wall. And the idea, of course, is to try and breach the other side's shield wall. And that's where the crashing comes into play. That the moment you sort of see that there might be an opportunity to push through, you go and you crash, and the shield walls kind of crash together as you're trying to smash your way through. But that's not going to be a constant, we smash and just hold the smashing forever. That's not going to work. I mean, as our questioner points out here, that's just, people don't have the stamina for that, and the people on the front line are going to get hit. It's going to be bad. Like, you're that close, it's easy to cut a hamstring, to do whatever. It's simply incredibly dangerous. This would not be very smart tactics, right? Not smart leadership. So I think that these things were on and off. That the shield walls are sort of smash, hit for, but if you're not breaking through, that there's a natural pullback, and the rotations of men can happen at that point. You can get cohesion again, and it just kind of goes back and forth. In Never Greater Slaughter, which is my book on Brunanburh, I sort of said, like, from above, this would almost look like Jaws, like just kind of crunching each other on the field as these lines collapsed, and all the kind of blood and gross stuff in between. I was obviously going for a nice big metaphor there, but that's what this would look like. That it's not constant; it was going back and forth. Was that how
Yeah,
you'd see it too?
I think that I mean I think we're talking about two or three different things here. One is the actual moment on the battlefield when the shield walls interact, and of course not all battles. Was Hastings, of course, does not have shield wall interacting with shield wall. It has horses interacting with the shield wall. In each one of these, in that case, it's easier to understand. Obviously, they pull back. The horses have to pull back just because they're not going to, they're going to be standing there. Then they're going to have to pull back. It's very rare that I think that anything was a straight on melee for so long. We'd like to think it was the case, and of course, the shield wall isn't new, but Romans used their shields in this sort of way, and so did the Greeks and the phalanx. We're talking about the same thing, and there's an argument in ancient military history that I think is kind of funny. That is, do the phalanxes, if it's two phalanxes hitting each other, which frequently was, especially in the Peloponnesian Wars. I mean, what did they do? Did they push each other? Did they dance around? Did they move in certain directions? Of course, we got and the very simple answer when you read through all this is, well, maybe they stopped, withdrew, reacted, withdrew, reconsidered their formation, fixed the holes, then came back together. And that's how I could vision a shield wall up against a shield wall in the ancient or in the medieval period. It's curious. I've always thought of the shield wall as or sort of a fortification, a field fortification. In that case, we're only talking about defense. But obviously, what the question is asking is, what about the offense sort of thing? If you've got a shield wall that's sitting another shield wall, they can't both be defense by definition. So maybe that is a situation where they regroup, hit, regroup, and at that point they can fill in, rotate, do whatever they need to. But the thing that I've always wondered about, you may have some insight on this, because when I read this question, I thought, oh wow, this gets really to the essence of training. Um, I mean, we always consider that the citizen militias that formed the phalanx were took a long time and trained and seemed to have been pretty good. We don't seem to have a lot of evidence for that. Nobody's found, planes that are big enough to put a whole phalanx out on it. So, what type of training that might have been is not really referred to in the military manuals of that period, or even the military memoirs of that period. And in the early Middle Ages, how much training do you think it took you know, to turn a militia into a shield wall? Even professional soldiers, there weren't many in Anglo-Saxon England or Scandinavian that are running these shield walls. We don't hear of them too far into the continent. Wondering what type of training would it be needed to, you just go take your shield, overlap the next guy, and hope you don't die.
Yeah, well, in some respect, that's the beauty of the shield wall is that it doesn't actually require a lot of great brilliance to manage this, right? I mean, this is basically relying upon your instinct anyway. Your instinct is to get as close as you can to the people around you, protection in numbers, and hunker behind the thing that can stop a weapon. So, yeah, shield wall construction, if you will, is just about as simple as here. You want to be safe, pick up this shield and get with a bunch of other people that got shields, and y'all get behind your shields. So that part isn't that difficult. And when you are positioning these things on the field, of course, you're trying to fix your flanks as best you can with topography, so that you're not doing a lot of like turning of the shield wall. It's a fairly fixed position that is going forward, and potentially backward with this this kind of undulating pounding
Mm-hmm.
as you're trying to break through the other lines. So yeah, I mean, I think it's not the idea that this requires a lot of training. I just don't see it.
And
I
I
don't.
think you're right. That's the beauty. I mean, we have these
Yeah.
militias that are formed in the countryside. They seem to be participating in the shield walls. Certainly, even when Harold Godwinson is coming down, he's picking up militia units to fill in, and when he goes up to Stamford Bridge, he's taking and pulling them together as well. And the most easy thing in the world is this is how you defend yourself, because you don't want anybody to run, which is the other aspect. You only fight a battle until the other side flees. You don't actually fight a battle until everybody's dead. That doesn't do you or the other side very, very much good. But it, it's a simple tactic, but it seems to have been very effective, and it's also simple to teach. So I think
Yeah.
that'd be the case. How what I find very interesting with the shield wall, and so far I've not found a lot of people who can reproduce this. The Lost Kingdom series that has been on following Bernard Cornwell's fictional group in Alfred the Great and through Athelstan's time. They seem to be doing fairly well. I don't like the double shield wall that they put up periodically. I've often wondered what the training is, not just to hold the shield wall, but to fight through it. I mean, at what point then do you tell the the militia person, oh, you overlap a shield, that's for defensive purposes. you know, it's going to be a nice little dance out there if both sides do just that and don't actually use a weapon to, punch through, punch over.
Well, of course, it's the guys behind have got are spears.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
But they don't.
so
Do they
you've
throw
got
them? It doesn't seem that they throw them. That seems to be,
no,
yeah. Uh,
no. I mean, they would some, right? We have this on
mm,
the Vega Tapestry.
yeah,
We do have that you would throw spears at times, but once you've thrown a weapon, you no longer have that
yeah,
weapon. So
yeah,
the only reason you're going to be doing that is if you think this is going to to actually cause a breach in the other line, because that's what you're trying to do is create shield wall on shield wall. You're trying to break the other line.
yeah,
And lose as few of your men as possible in the process. Because as Kelly said, and we've said this numerous times, you just trying to get the other side to rout,
mhm,
and then everybody gets in the
yeah,
back. That's what you want. And so as soon as you saw any kind of weakness or a stumble or whatever in the other shield wall, that's when you're going to surge forward. There's going to be that kind of crash, but and you're going to try and sustain that, right? Sustain that momentum. But if it's held back and you're in this kind of wrestling match, you're not going to sit there and do that for hours.
Well, on top of
It's
the
just
fact that what is the basic order is you guys will live if you fold over your shields in this. And all it takes is one to say, I'm gone from this line, and now you've got a hole, and that defeats the
yeah,
entire shield wall. At Courtrai, the intelligence of essentially forming a shield wall. It wasn't necessarily a shield wall in the way that it would be at Brunenburg, but the idea of forming militias. Of course, they've got really good armor as well. But forming them against the river so that they can't retreat, that was, that is done. I mean, at Brunenburg, it's clear that both sides have the capability of leaving, and
right,
ultimately the Vikings and Scots they do. Um,
yeah.
so,
But after so
but
much
after
time,
so
of
much
course, that's
time,
the
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
Yeah, it's pretty amazing that it went on so long. So yeah, shield walls. I must also say that with this and phalanx and Roman legionnaire tactics, we're helped out a lot by reenactors, who are working to sort of see what can be done on this. I was just exchanging information and talking with somebody who's doing some Greek warfare, ancient Greek warfare, and trying to see how much the curvature of the shield was diminishing the pressure felt by the body in a crush of a phalanx. And it turns out quite a lot.
yeah.
It's pretty amazing how much it dissipates the impact around the body if you have the shield in front of it. It's cool stuff that folks are doing.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, go team
Yeah,
reenactors.
I mean, I will say that there are sometimes, especially with the shield wall, I'm kind of thinking about that when what was that show, Weapons of the Made England? where it was Mike Lodes had the idea that, what happens if you get attacked from the other side of the shield wall? Well, everybody raises their shields at once and then brings them down in
Oh
fashion.
yeah, I remember that.
And yeah, not the right interpretation there. Nobody would do that. That opens your entire side,
Yeah.
and you cannot bring them down together. It just and when he tried to do it,
And
they just never could. They all got tangled up because everybody's different size. Got tangled up. They couldn't do it. And then of course, Lord of the Rings comes out, the second film, and they go up and they face one way, turn, and then their shields back interlocking, and it was just so much more simple. So sometimes the reenactors can go out a little bit too far on their
yeah,
notions. No, nobody
yeah.
lift your shield in the air to reverse yourself
And
the other side.
anybody want to poke me in the
Yeah,
armpit?
that's
Anybody
right.
want to
Yeah,
hit that artery?
yeah, that would
Yeah, not a good
no.
idea. Yeah, that's. I mean, yeah, reenactment. Yeah,
We
sometimes
probably just got a
folks
lot
can
of
get.
reenactors upset. No, I'm completely with you. The interpretation of these, the Royal Armies have some really good interpreters that have talked of, and there's nothing more fun on top of everything to be actually dressed in
Yeah,
armor and
yeah.
to go out and do some things and then have a lot of fun at the end of the evening.
There, well, there you go.
Mhm.
Our next question from Fantastic Legions.
Mhm.
Nice.
Speaking of legions,
Yeah, I would like to know the learned professors. Check it out. We're learned, dude. I love
yeah,
it.
I'm wondering
The
this,
learned
this is
professor's
supposed to go to
take
somewhere else, huh?
on the army of Charles the Bold of Burgundy. At least by appearances, the Duke assembled a large, well ordered, and well financed standing army. But in the field, it met with a spectacular defeat after spectacular defeat. God, that's so true. From forces that appear to be less modern or professional. Any thoughts on why this
Yeah,
is? Kelly, my
yeah.
friend, I know you have thoughts.
I have not only had thoughts, I've tried to answer this question on a number of occasions. First of all, I got to throw out um, the the four. There's two works, the medieval historical works that I have. Whenever anybody says, "What do you wish you'd written?" or what are the greatest books that are unheralded books on medieval military history or some aspect? And there's two series of four. I mean, the Ken Sentence, Papacy, and all that just is walks in water. Sometimes I take that out just to read the footnotes because it's amazing. He says, "Oh yeah, I'll put this footnote in, and it's in kind of medieval Italian." Well, everybody will read that. I may have to translate the medieval Ottoman ones, but the footnotes are amazing. In that the other set is Richard Vaughan's four-volume biographies on the Valois Dukes of Burgundy, beginning with Philip the Bold, then John the Fearless, Philip the Good, and Charles the Bold. Um, there are some interesting that Chris Given Wilson and I, a little bit in our cups one night at one of the early leads, we kind of jumping on the John the Fearless volume about that because Bertrand Sheriff had just come out with his John the Fearless, and it was a bit better. But the Charles the Bold volume that Vaughn wrote is just out of this world good and still stands the test of time. A lot of work on this. We've got a lot of different documents, a lot more documents for Charles than we do on the others. And his for Charles and his father, Philip the Good, we definitely have a lot. Um, yeah, how is it possible that Charles has got this army that is so well organized and so well done? We have the ordinances that Charles put out, at least two of them, the last one in 1473, that he, sorry, 1473, where he reorganizes the army. I mean, we've got the ones that Philip the Good before him had organized the crusade. I mean, even the number of interpreters that needed because of all of the different languages would be spoken in Burgundy at this point in time, and those carried through. the These may be the first medieval ordering of an army in what some have called the professional way. And then Charles does this and goes and loses. We got to remember that Charles has been in charge,
Again and
and again,
again.
again. Yeah. Charles has been in charge of the Burgundians on the battlefield since 2 years before his father dies. So his father dies in 1467. Charles has been involved since at least 1465. And initially, he doesn't lose. All through that first period down to the 1470s, he's very effective and very ruthless in his effectiveness. So he defeats the Liégeois and the rebels at the Battle of Brustem in 1467. I mean, that's a huge battle. That's a battlefield, by the way, you need to find just simply because it is on an army base that has been used for missile fire, so they won't let anybody go on it. And I say, seriously, it's like one of the few times that that there's a victorious army on here, and you've destroyed the base with modern meaning 20th century ordnance in Belgium. I don't think they've used anything else. But then he goes up to Dinant and defeats that city, just terribly ruthless to the people inside, and then goes to Liège, and in 1468-69 does the same thing. I mean, the brutality that he uses in putting down these rebellions is pretty extraordinary, and it far surpasses anything that his father or grandfather would do when they were facing rebellions. Great grandfather, they all faced rebellions in the Low Countries. But Charles is really, really devastatingly vicious, and when he gets involved in the initial fight against Lorraine, he does the same. Lorraine being one of his provinces, again in rebellion. Of course, the ones that we always think about is the Siege of Neuss. He's there for a year, 1474-75, and is completely unable to take the town. I've been there. I've gone around. Some of the fortifications are still up. He has probably the greatest gunpowder artillery force there, and he can't get through the walls. And then he goes off and loses 3 battles in a row, 2 in 1476, the Battle of Granson and the Battle of Merton, or Morat, if you want to go with the French version, and then finally the Battle of Nancy, where his life is killed. Now you have to, first of all, you have to exclude the Battle of Nancy. It's desperation. He basically has has nothing. He has no guns. They've all been taken and captured and also just destroyed. Um, he has no troops. It's and he's trying to attack a city that's got a fairly good wall again, and basically he gets destroyed there. It's hard to see anything at Nancy because they have a park where he was found, and it's right in the middle of town nowadays. Grandson and Merton are very interesting, and this is one where I think the regular forces that he has now put into his army, this ordnance that he's now put in, when he puts them on the field in Grandson, they should have been able to take the Swiss very easily. And if you go to Granson, I'd say everybody go because the battlefield is still open. It's still agricultural lands, and you can actually see on the battlefield very clearly from any direction that Charles had raised a part to put his artillery on, his guns on, in order to give them more distance down the side of the lake, as he anticipated the Swiss would be coming that way. And he had his entire army facing that direction. They are well ordered and everything else. And the Swiss go through the trees and come down through a forest, which they could do because they were irregular forces. So when they weren't actually of the same quality, maybe not even the same leadership that Charles and the Burgundian army was. They certainly weren't the same experience, but part of all of that, making Charles's army so professional, if you will, is that they stayed with orders longer than they probably would have if they had their own initiative on the battlefield. And so when the Swiss come, Charles and the army are facing down the lake, waiting for the Swiss to come on to battle and fight a regular battle that they figure line upon line that they just roll over them. Swiss come and flank him through the trees. Is that a failure of the ordnance, the failure of the army, the failure of the professionalism in the troops? That they, in fact, live another day, even though Charles is absolutely destroyed in that battle and has to flee, and then rises up a few months later is fighting the next battle at Merton. That's probably indication of the quality of troops that he's got, that they will be able to retreat and still regroup and form an army, not one battle decisive or not, one battle indecisive in that case. Well, I think it's a failure of leadership. And that's the problem, is that if you can have the most professional army you want, you put it, all the ordinances out there. There's even ordinances, by the way, of how many surgeons in each one. One of the funniest passes I ever read when I was doing Charles the Bold is they talk about the various different groups of people in his army, and the surgeons, and evidently the surgeon's biggest complaint was the backblast out of the handguns was burning the faces of the gunners, because they were holding them. They weren't holding them with their eye, but they were holding them in the middle, and the backblast of gunpowder would burn their faces, and then please send more salve for burned faces.
Need more salve.
Yeah,
so there's the leadership of sort of a peacetime leadership, in the sense of organizing, assembling, the logistical apparatus of putting together an army. And then there is the tactical leadership on the field, and so you kind of think like he had one of these, but not necessarily the other.
Yeah, I mean, his logistics was pretty good even before Merton, because he has to leave all his guns at Grandson, and they're retreating so quickly, they leave them behind, and these became Burgunderbeute, the booty, the Burgundian booty that still fills a lot of the museums in Switzerland, especially if you go to Grandson, if you go to some of these other places. Merton also has some. Bern has some very interesting ones. He sends out a second order after that, or a second order. It's really a plea, send anything you can. I don't have any more guns. Send what you can. And he gets a couple of them that are a little bit older, I think, than he was hoping for. But they do come. They're still, because they're lost. We've got these ones that are lost in the second wave after the second battle. But I think that the true essence of Charles's leadership is shown to me by the fact that he even fought Nancy. As merciful to his, to his lands, that he was killed at that point, because then they don't have to kill any more soldiers. The numbers that die in the Burgundian army through those three battles are incredible. And it's one of the things that puts Mary, his daughter, who is going to replace him, it puts her at a real disadvantage. So that in 1477, right after the Battle of Nancy and the death of Charles the Bold, Louis the 11th attacks Mary's lands almost immediately, because one, perhaps a woman, that's how it's already interpreted. I think it's just that he doesn't have anything. There isn't any more Burgundian army. There's no more Burgundian soldiers. No, so the order, but the ordinance, the idea of organizing the army, that goes to Mary's husband, Maximilian, and so the Habsburgs' armies from this time forward, and even the armies of Ferdinand and Isabella in Spain, because they're also informed from the son of Charles, the grandson of Charles Bold, Philip the Handsome, and they are, they keep Charles's order intact. So in fact, we get this major reorganization of an army. It looks like it absolutely fails in the 1470s when Charles is running it, but when Maximilian's running it, and then when Philip and Ferdinand are running the exact same thing, they win, and they win. So it's got, in my estimation, is a defeat of leadership in this case, and not necessarily of administration.
Yeah. And if you happen to have our medieval reader and want to see this sort of administrative organization, we have a real interesting account in there about the transport of artillery, and it's down to, I need this many horses for this many cannons, I need this much gunpowder and this many barrels. I mean, it really is broken down quite
Yeah.
nicely. I mean, you can see that kind of organizational principle at
No,
work. So
the size of that part of Charles's army, the size is huge. The number of men, the number of horses, the number of
yeah,
specialized of artisans that are along, metal and wood and everything else. It is an amazing thing to see, to then see how professional that's become, but see how necessary it's become, and then
yeah,
recognize that even though, because that one is on the way to Noise, that train is on the way to Noise,
yeah,
and Noise is not a victory. So even with all that
yeah,
organization and everything else against a town that is well fortified and has its own arsenal in it and so forth, although Noise was not particularly a large town, it held out until there was reinforcements that came and rescued it. Charles
yeah.
did not have any success.
A leader can be magnificent in one arena and not so good in
Yeah.
another. It's hard to find people that are ideal in all of these cases. Kind of find that throughout history.
Yes, absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
so a somewhat related question. This comes from Phil Feller, who watched our Core Try episode. Thank you,
Thank you.
good man. Who wonders what factors led to the resurgence of pike armed infantry in the early 14th century? Were there societal, cultural, political, or economic changes that enabled organization and regular drilling of large militia bodies? What factors provided incentives to engage in training rather than other activities?
Yes, and the answer is
Speaking
yes.
of
Yes,
professionalization.
the answer is yes. It is. First of all, pike armies, what we're talking about here is not really pikes per se. The Flemings at Courtrai don't use pikes for example, not in the way we would think about.
Good day.
Yeah, not the huidah. Yeah, and we're talking
Good
about
day.
uh, kind of staff weapons that are being used, and then those aren't really just 14th century. I mean, they like we'll probably talk about the longbow a little later on, but they and the longbow around for a while. It's just how I mean, what we start seeing is a resurgence of infantry warfare in the 14th century that this becomes a part of it. I mean, pike arms. These Swiss are also changing, and they're becoming. They're using staff weapons of different types. The Flemings are using staff weapons of different types. But the Brabantes in the 13th century used these. In fact, almost all armies had some of these type of infantry forces. The Italians, we know, had staff weapons back to the 11th century, and one of the reasons why the why some of the terms are actually Italian seem to have come out of that. Although what we call each staff weapon is a different matter. Um, I think that the real interesting thing here is that the question is societal, cultural, political, or economic. We go back to training. We go back to what do you have outfit, and when we see what at Courtrai we see are urban militias. Urban militias have time to practice, a lot more time to practice than a rural militia will do, but they also have a lot better, because of the wealth, they have a lot better weapons. And one of these weapons is um, these pikes or the staff weapons, pole weapons. And so I think that that's the answer may be less technological and more that these are the ones that urban militias use, and we start seeing urban militias everywhere, including the Battle of Crazy. They come on the moment your Orleans go on the battlefield. We've talked about that. Very interesting that the rest of the militias all leave, but the Orleans, who seem to be particularly um, uh, badly managed or whatever, they go on to the
Yeah.
battlefield after the battle's lost and they lose themselves. So they're not always successful. But I think what's happening in the 14th century is this whole rise of the militias and their role, especially the urban militias' role in fighting wars, preserving their own sovereignty, what they want, and then and then using militia forces who are getting better in putting them in mercenary groups rather than going back and being a blacksmith in a town or being labor in a town. You've got some special infantry skill. Join John Hawkwind, go see the world, that sort of thing.
So the kind of question then becomes, this is and this is how a lot of things are in history, is if we say, well, it's more because of the rise of urban militia groups that we're seeing this kind of infantry. What's causing the rise in urban militia groups, right? What's causing that? Is this the result of kind of new mercantilism that's beginning to overtake some of these towns? Is this
Well, there's really a lot of
sure
growth in the towns, of course, at this time.
yeah
The medieval historians don't just teach about the military. We try to, but we don't. There is this question about, the rise of towns, rise of urban areas, and the county of Flanders is filled. The county of Flanders, county of Brabant, Duchy of Brabant, the county of Hainaut, all have major urban militias because they're wealthy cloth-making towns. Northern Italy's the same way, and you have the growth of towns in the Holy Roman Empire, the growth of towns and in Switzerland's another perfect example. And so there's actually a shift, of course, away at the same time, away from feudal retinues, from feudal levies. Nobody's just calling up everybody and say, bring, your retinue to the Lord, bring your retinue. They do. I'll give you a perfect example, Battle of Campaldino, 1289. That's what the countryside does. The feudal retinues should show up, and I know people are going to write, you're using the word feudal. In this case, I'm using obligated retinues that go to fight with their lords, and they show up against the the Florentine militia. I mean, we know it's a Florentine militia. Dante's one of them. He's not a
yep
professional soldier by any means. He's already a pretty well-known poet, and they show up with their militia, and the battle is won. Now, we're going to have to do Battle of Campaldino. We'll bring on the expert Niccolo Capone, and
yeah yeah we'll bring Niccolo.
we'll deal with this because it is quite an interesting battle. And the urban
Yeah
militias don't do very well at the beginning of the battle, but they come through at the end because ultimately what they do is fight defensive battles very well. And that's what it becomes at the end of Campaldino. So I think that this is an interesting case. One of the things that I'm just not an interesting case where we can focus on one thing. The societal, cultural, political, economic, yes, all of those essentially. I also think that we're seeing at this period of time as a real transformation of warfare. So it's not going to be very long before we start getting the artillery and handheld guns on battlefields too, and that pretty much completely destroys the old idea of the feudal levy. Towns do have their own guns; they do have their own gunpowder weapons, and ultimately will have units of handheld guns. In this time, we've got the rise of militias. I think it's very important, and the rise of militias, the rise of mercenaries, which I also think is very important. And one of those, let's not handle it now, but I know we're going to get questions later on about the organization of mercenaries. How
yeah
many? And most mercenary forces are infantry, so
yeah
they.
we'll have to talk about that, but we're already 45 minutes in here. We're
Oh,
only got through
geez,
three questions,
only
so
three.
yeah we yeah it's because they're good questions.
They are
Well
good questions.
done.
They do bring up a lot, but a lot of books need to be written on transformation.
Yes
Do.
yes new books, good books. All right, let's see here. From Tim Hammock. How many arrows could a trained archer fire, say, in a minute? I'll just say none because arrows aren't fired. But we'll go on. We'll go on. And did the archers hold a handful of arrows in their grip, stick them in the earth, or pull them individually from the quiver each time? Did time and place in training make a difference? Were longbow arrows too large and the bow pulled too difficult? Longbowmen had to be on firm footing, correct? Could not be on a horse or particularly active unless they were kind of like running away. Yeah, so lots of kind of questions in there about longbow stuff. Um, we know that regular training did occur. We actually have in the medieval reader, we're always plugging this thing.
Yeah, it's got
The Medieval Warfare Reader, we actually have a royal decree from 1363 insisting that all able-bodied Englishmen practice the bow on feast days or on any other occasion when they might engage in games or competitions. Stop playing other games.
yeah.
Start having archery competitions to practice. It's an awesome little decree, and we've got others of these too. So the English were nicely trained as a result. The likely result of that practice was that bowmen could shoot. If you want to know how often they could loose, you could get off a shot every 5 seconds or so. And we see this with reenactors. Like, okay, all right. The issue is you doing that. If you just did that, all right, you could keep it up stamina wise. You'd run through 12 arrows in a minute, which is like, wow, that's like awesome. Like, check that out. But a fast rate of shot isn't generally like the point. That's not why the longbow was so awesome. So to give an example of Crecy, because just had a book come out. So at Crecy, for instance, the records of the Armoury of the Tower of London show that each archer was allotted around 40 arrows for the campaign. That's sort of how the average works out. Probably it was 2 sheaves. Sheaf is 24 each. So 2 quivers worth, basically. Even if we imagined, I'm not sure that we can, that along the campaign, they were able to keep this number constant. Okay, so each guy's got like 40 arrows. All right. I'm not sure we can, but let's accept that. At this max rate of shot, the bowmen would be useless in less than 4 minutes. Like 4 minutes into the battle, they'd be empty and have nothing. They'd be utterly useless, dead weight. And that's not what happened. Like longbows aren't machine guns. All right. What they are relative to, say, the crossbow is cheap, which means you can field more of them. Edward III had roughly 8,700 archers at Crecy. If each guy was shooting just like once a minute, you'd have 40 minutes of sustained shots. And of course, they're not doing that. They're doing this in waves as they're getting, as the enemy's coming, right? But even if we were to do that and sustained like once a minute, I shoot once a minute, like 8,700 arrows going into the air once a minute. That's a lot of arrows. Like that's 145 a second. It's a lot. Movies sort of like train us to look for kind of like the heroic individual action, like the Robin Hood, bam, 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 or Legolas, shooting all these bloody arrows. That's not the idea here. It's mass actions of a force. It's, let's get thousands of this. And yeah, you just shoot one every, it's all right. There's thousands of us. It's going to be a lot. So the individual rate of fire isn't what's important. It's the cumulative mass of fire that you get. I'm using fire here because the same is going to be the case for gunpowder weapons later on. But that's what matters here, is bringing so many weapons to bear, and that's absolutely the case with the longbow.
Yeah. And that's the answer. I mean, now here I am. Those of you, I may have mentioned it before, Robert Hardy, the late great Robert Hardy, who had been so influential in getting the Mary Rose up and was such an interesting person, actually told me very loudly one time in a public conference that, Kelly DeVries, you know nothing about the English longbow. So I guess I'm
take that.
We did agree that I knew a little bit about English longbowmen. He thought I was okay, which is okay. The idea that somehow these guys are using a 400-pound pull bow, launching 10 arrows in the air at once. Not only is that virtually impossible to pull, and all reenactors will tell you around 100 pounds is the only one that can be pulled consistently. And that, if you put 10 arrows in the air in a minute, you're done with arrows. There's
arrows.
And the idea that was put out by Cliff Rogers and Hardy had said this. So, they would send people out to gather up the arrows. Well, No, they didn't.
Oh God.
When I
Yeah.
mentioned that to after Tim Sutherland on the battlefield of Towton, who dug the battlefield of Towton and found all these arrowheads, and he says, "Yeah," he says, "those arrows are broken. They're all sorts of problems." And this kind of gets to one of the other parts of the question, which is how do the archers actually carry the arrows? I mean, do they have them in their quiver? Can they bring them up? Well, we do know, for example, horse archers, they can't carry arrows in their hands, and they can't put them in, they can't stuff them in the back of the horse, uh, point down.
Let's point down
Yeah,
in the back of the
but
neck.
they had that. If
Handy.
you look at the depictions of horse archers, their head is up, and so the arrow, the quivers, the quivers at the bottom is the fletching. So what they're doing is they're grabbing the arrow, and as they're pulling it out of the quiver, they're also stringing their bow, or not stringing the bow, spanning their bow, and
Yeah.
ready to shoot that arrow. So there is some indication that that's what arrows could be done from a quiver. The uh, uh, we do know that they held them. We know that they had them in their belts. I mean, that's mentioned all the time. Uh, you don't have a really sharp arrow, so it's perhaps not going to, if you withdraw it from the belt, you're not going to be scratching yourself, and maybe doing the same thing as a quiver with the head up and and spanning the bow as you're pulling the arrow out. The one thing I don't think they did, and I think we see this too often in media presentations, and there's even been a few historians saying they didn't put it in the dirt before in front of them. They just stuff these arrows in the dirt. Why not? Because when you pick up an arrow and it's now got the point is the head is all covered in muck. And if you're trained as an archer, you're trained with a certain arrow weight. You don't want to add to the front of that arrow whatever muck you pull out of the ground, because that now puts your training all at risk. You've now got to readjust the bow, and readjust your own pull and everything else in order to take advantage or to compensate for that muck on the arrowhead. So I think that sometimes common sense says, "Oh, we'll just stuff them in the ground." Go ahead, you take an arrow, even an arrowhead that doesn't have the tangs on the side. Take it, shove it in the ground, pull it back out, and tell me it's clean. It isn't.
Yeah. So I agree. Yes, but also I've shot a bow and done it with arrows pulling them off the ground, and I didn't. I mean, obviously, yeah. If a lot of stuff's coming with it, yeah, you wouldn't want to do that. But if it's coming out fairly clean, like what the hell do I care if a little dirt's on the end? It's not going to change the weight that much, and it'll infect the wound worse. Um, so the how it's carried, ultimately, and I think we both agree on this. It depends absolutely on the conditional situation, right? This is there's no trying to think how to say it. There's no standard practice to just about anything in warfare. It's like, yeah, but it works this way for me. All right. Well, we need you to shoot the bow. So, yeah, there are patterns of behavior, and people in England, the English used a longbow differently than, or pulled the bow, spanned the bow differently than people on the continent did. Like, are you pushing into the bow or pulling back on the string? Like these are different practices, but you're not going to always say you do like stick him in the ground. And the nice thing about having the ground in front of you is it's very, very quick to span and shoot and loose the bow. Like that's great. So if opportunity is like, I'm not going to have to move position and I can do this, great.
Yeah.
Right. But you wouldn't do that if you were like, well, we're going to have to move position. Like, because now you're like, oh, well, hold on a second, guys. I
Yeah.
can't go yet.
Yeah.
I can get my arrows out of the ground. All right. Okay. Now I'm ready to move. Like, if you know that you got to move, you can't do that. So a lot of this is very, very dependent on what the situation is. And the bow, the archers were something that were a mobile force potentially on the field, which is of great utility.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a great question.
Well, common sense also tells us, I mean, if they're in a quiver, and this is one of the funny things. I was looking when you look at Legolas pulling these things out one after another, and I'm thinking, doesn't the fletching get caught? I mean, if you've got the arrowhead pointed up, then all the fletchings together at the bottom. Try withdrawing just one of those arrows at a time, because it'll pull out the whole bunch of them. And if they're not coming in a quiver, if they're just a bunch, as it appears that sometimes came in, sheaf, as you call them, and came in the English. The moment you undo the whatever is tying that sheaf together, all those arrows in front of you, you've got to have some means of gathering them up. Just how is very odd. To say, because you can't put
Yeah,
40 arrows around your waist either if you're an archer.
it has totally fallen out of my head. Somebody hopefully will make a note of it somewhere. I was like a couple of years ago, somebody put out a really neat article. These guys had figured out the actual knot that the English were using to tie the arrows together. I can't remember who it was. I was like, dang, it was brilliant. It was really
Oh
good
well,
stuff.
I mean, we
I'll
do
have to see if I can
we do see these things in art. So that probably needs to we need to look at more some of those bizarre little things. I guess it's good that some
yeah.
lad somewhere
Somebody's
said,
working on
"Oh
it. Look,
yeah, look at that weird art." Weird
let's figure out the knot.
knot on the art. Would reconstruct it.
Love it. Love
I
it.
got a question just
Uh,
a little bit before that from Joshua Bryn, who would ask me.
mm,
This is before we were asking questions, but I thought it was such a good one when we bring it up in relationship to this. His question was, if the longbow was effective, we've said it here and
yeah.
everything. Why is it not
Yeah.
adopted by other forces, especially by the French, obviously, in the Hundred Years' War? And
Yeah.
that's a really interesting question, and it has to do, I think, with the again going back to the whole thing about skill of making them, availability of the natural resources, availability of archers to train the next generation, and so forth, so on. First of all, the the idea that the long bow has existed, always existed, excuse me, always existed is pretty common. It's been pushed by Matthew Strickland and Robert Hardy. But it seems the massing of them in great numbers only happens at the end of the 13th century. And we have to think that the English kings before then are using crossbows. That's all in the evidence that we have. And David Bacharach's done a whole bunch of articles on the availability and the use of crossbows by the kings prior to Edward I. And so it doesn't seem that the English used them that much early. And the first instance that the Scots see longbow archery en masse, probably not until Halidon Hill in 1333. If they did see them, they may have seen them a little bit in 1298 at Falkirk. But it'll be interesting, to go back in and see how much of an effectiveness they have. The French don't see the longbow until 1346, and that's they don't have any mass archery battles until Crecy, and so it's very late in the day already. If they had come out of that battle and said, "Oh, we all have to do this. We all have to find archery, and we all have to make longbows and so forth." It would have taken several years, probably a couple generations before they could have come up. And that's only if they thought that was the reason why they lost. And I don't know that in the literature. Certainly at Poitiers, the longbow is used less well than Edward III did at Edward Black Prince using it at Poitiers. Uses it less well than Edward did at Crecy. We know that Henry uses it a lot in 1415 at Agincourt, but the French actually don't have this consistent use of longbow against them. Now, it can be argued that the 15th century, the Frank archers, another unit that put together, is longbow archery. Whether it's longbow or whether it's just regular bows, the French do try to do it. But by that time, the English are having difficulties getting the longbows. So, because the English have now been siphoning off for their wars over in France, they've been siphoning off all the generations that would have taught the next generation to come through. And this is very much the rule you we have in the warfare reader that you actually brought up before today, which they said you can't play any of the games. You got to go shoot
Yeah.
at the bots, because the idea is we need to get more archers out there, and nobody's practicing it. When
Yeah.
before 1300, when they had massive groups on the marches, and they all seemed to come out of the Welsh marches. These guys are hunters, they're poachers and other things. So they've taught generations what to do with the archery. You take all those guys and put them in France, they're not there to teach the next generation. So
Yeah.
it's longbow archery is a blip of technology in a very long period. Very effective blip for maybe 100, 150 years, and then it's not anymore. It disappears from the English as well. So
Yeah.
I think it's more of a question: why didn't everybody adopt it? Than why is it adopted at that point, and why does it run out?
Right. I mean, we have this kind of blind spot, I think, because we just tend to look at the Hundred Years' War so thoroughly, and look at it very Anglo-centrically. I mean, I'm guilty of this too, right? My book just came out as on Crecy. The one I'm writing on now is Agincourt. Like, we do this, and it's because they're awesome battles. But that can give a false impression of like what's going on with the French. As Kelly just said, look, the French have archers. Like, they know how a bow works. This is not. It's not. It's not like it's some super secret recipe that the English have. That's not the case. The French understood the technology. It's not that complicated. The French use bows just as the English use crossbows. Like, no weapons technology, if it's effective, can long remain exclusive to one side or another in warfare. Like, that just doesn't happen. So they knew, and the issue, as I've heard some people say as well, the French couldn't make a proper bow. That's bull. No, no, stop it right now. Use grow across. They still do. They still grow across Europe. For crying out loud, by the time of Agincourt, the English are importing their yew staves from the Iberian Peninsula in northern Italy, because they've run out. So this idea, well, the French just couldn't get the right kind of wood. Are you kidding? No, that's not at all the problem. The problem, as Kelly was saying, is that this was not a common skill on the continent the way it was as it was in England at the start of the Hundred Years' War. And it's not something you can train up, like just pick it up and go. Like, it takes a lot of practice, unlike the crossbow.
Right.
The crossbow is something that you can just pick up, and it's all right. This is the trigger. All right, point that end of the thing and bang. Like, it's really easy to loose a crossbow.
And aiming doesn't help a crossbow. I tried. A friend and I, when we were teens, we took his 75-pound pull crossbow, so a very meager one, and we took it to a football field and tried to hit from 100 yards away. Obviously, we tried to hit the goalposts. We came within 30 feet of them.
It's a big enough crowd, you're going to hit somebody, buddy.
I suppose that was our consolation. We didn't really get close to it. It was still a very powerful weapon, but but it didn't matter. We could not have the skill. There was so much jump by the power of the crossbow that you really couldn't aim. And yet we know that our longbow archers could aim, and they were able to, they were used to it, but they were also, used to taking their longbows into woods and bringing back rabbits. So they've got to be fairly good at that. I'm working a little bit on a Battle of Sluys right now, in 1340, which is a naval battle. The English had archers there, but they were not in mass. They were on the ships, and they're mentioned in the literature, but not the way that they're mentioned in Crecy. So it's very easy to recognize that also that the French had just not ever seen them. The Scots had not ever seen them before, not in those numbers until the English use it. But it's gone. By 1460, the number of archers have declined. It's a difficult thing for the Lancastrians and the Yorks to find them in the Wars of the Roses.
Yeah, and for all their, kind of, it was this amazing thing that the French won the 100 Years' War.
Yeah.
So
Yes. Yeah.
throw that out
Remind
there.
that the French won the 100 Years' War. More hate mail. The French did not win the 100 Years' War.
We're already an hour in here, man.
I don't know whether we got a short one. We can put Peter's asked this question about the castles. We can put that off. We have a short one.
We'll
yes, I guess we better finish with this one. So Wayne Ingalls said, this is a question specifically for me. In medieval warfare, reader, you and Dr. Livingston, no, this was me. I will take credit or blame on that. Stated that King Richard III was made justly infamous by William Shakespeare. And he says, I don't know your other work. I don't have, so I don't know if you've written extensively on King Richard III, but I do know you've accepted the invitation to be the keynote address at this year's general membership meeting of the Richard III Society American branch. Yay, yes, I have. I will not be speaking about Richard III there. I'll be speaking about guns on battlefield, and guns on Wars of the Roses. And I will, in fact, have to correct myself on that. I will not be correcting myself on the fact that I think Richard III was a scum human being. I don't think he's a particularly good general either. Bosworth is not a sterling battle as much as everybody wants it to be. We're going to have to do Bosworth at some point. But the idea that, Stanley decides everything at the very last moment by going towards the Lancastrians. Yeah, that's kind of because the Richard side is losing badly. Yeah. And it isn't that long into the battle before Richard's side is losing. Mike and I were talking about this before, and the idea is, how is it that the Richard III people really want to exonerate this guy? We want to call it Tudor propaganda. And I would agree it is a lot of Tudor propaganda. I hate the Tudors too, by the way. Henry VIII is worse than Richard III on any day with any number of wives, by the way. Richard's marriage seems to have been a lot better than any of Henry's was. But if you go by military performance, he was dreadful. Bosworth was a dreadful defeat, and he basically took part in very few of the battles that had been fought in the Wars of the Roses. In contrast to his brother Edward IV, who's a really good general. And we're going to talk about Taunton, but Edward IV, a really good general. He wins a lot of battles. There's a lot of other people there. Richard loses the only battle he's in charge of and gets his just deserts. There's no question in my mind, even beyond the one that, possible
shots fired.
The idea that, or possible nephews committing rituals or committing youth suicide, which is one of the craziest theories I ever heard, is that the two boys weren't killed by their uncle, who loved them and doted on them. They, in fact, committed suicide.
The Princes in the Tower.
In the Tower.
I'm going to just let you take all the heat.
Yeah, you let me take all the heat on this one. I wish we could all be in the same room when Richard gets pissed off at William Lord Hastings and has him dragged out and beheaded in the courtyard. I have been in the Tower of London overnight, and I tell you, I went out specifically. I could care less about all the wives showing up. That would have scared the hell out of me, but I wanted the ghost of Hastings to show up just so I could say to him, all right, set this straight. You lost your head to this bastard. Tell me, why do people want to resurrect Richard III as some sort of a benevolent king when he is not? He's terrible in almost all ways.
But I will say this for the other side, that he was absolutely trashed by the Tudors. The Tudors, it's absolutely, a propaganda effort to try and wreck him. Yes, 100% agree. 100% agree. That doesn't mean everything's hunky dory on the other side, but it is absolutely true. The effort that the Tudors go to blacken his reputation is extraordinary, and I do think it's one of the things I really love about the Richard III Society and Ricardians in general is that foregrounding of the kind of political mechanisms that exist behind our sources that too often I think we forget, and we're like, oh, this chronicle says X, therefore it's true, instead of like, well, this chronicle says, who's paying for the chronicle? Like, who's behind that? Why is that the way it is? I know you were just recently doing some work on this with Froissart, that look, I have all these different versions of Froissart, and everybody's like, well, Froissart's the greatest guy. Like, Froissart doesn't always agree with himself. Like, which Froissart do you want? Which one is it? And the question there is like, well, who's paying for it? That's the Froissart you got. So too often we forget about this, and just we have the source and it just exists in a vacuum. They do not exist in vacuums. No, and one of the magnificent things that the Richard III Society, I do think sometimes we go a little bit too far, into conspiracy land at some points. But the general principle that, like, my God, we've got to be aware of the biases of all this stuff. I think it's magnificent. I think that's great. So go team in that regard.
Yeah. Don't let a pendulum across the way, though. So you start painting somebody who isn't particularly good into a really good person because you say, well, it's so bad. He has to be
right.
Right. I mean, the Lancastrians and the Tudors both tried to smear Edward IV's name, and they threw stuff at him, and it didn't work because he wasn't. There has to be facts behind some of the propaganda, and in the case of Edward IV, they threw all sorts of propaganda at him, and none of it has stuck at all, to the point that one historian has tried to remove Edward from the Yorkist family. I've tried to say he was the bastard son of an archer, because look at how bad and ugly the rest of the York family was. And I admit they were bad and ugly, although take a look at the Valois if you want to, and then the Habsburg will come along and you'll say, wow. It didn't stick to Edward as much as the crap thrown at Richard stuck.
Well, all right. So Wayne, I hope I don't know. I hope if you're mad, you're mad.
And absolutely. And by the way, come to the Richard III Society American Branch conference the end of this year. I will be one of the keynotes, and we'll be talking not about Richard, but you're more than welcome to bring whatever bad fruit you have and throw it at me. Tomatoes.
I'm going to come and throw something.
Yeah, that should be it.
I'm good. So, we've already gone way over an hour. So I think, Peter, we got your question about castles. We're going to put it on our hold list. We'll come back to it. The other one we didn't get to here, we had one from Paula about guerrilla style warfare.
Oh yeah, we need to do that.
I think we're going to probably doing, maybe something on Glendour. Certainly that'd be my kind of, really good example of this guerrilla style warfare. How do traditional armies combat it? I think Owen Glendour is a great example of that. So I think we're probably going to end up folding that into its own episode because it's just an awesome question.
Maybe not focus on a battle, but focus on guerrilla warfare, because there's some good examples of that in the 100 Years' War as well.
Yeah, like really cool stuff. So Paula, we appreciate your question that will enable an episode down the road. So that's very cool.
Yeah.
So look, that's it for us.
Yeah.
Man.
The lights are already down. We can't see each other. The bartenders just gave up and they left tonight. So
they left. Look, I hope everybody enjoyed it. hope we kind of answer your questions, and if not, send
Yeah,
us in
send the
questions
question again.
about our
Yeah,
answers,
send the
and
question
we'll
again.
be like, all
No,
right,
you did
let's try it
not
again.
answer the one I wanted about
Yeah.
Richard III. He's
Right.
in heaven.
So yeah, send those in. So we'll have those ready. Please do join us next time. We're going to be talking about the Battle of Towton, which is kind of a big one, and I'm excited to do this because I have never. Kelly knows this battlefield and the battle like inside and out. I've never been to the battlefield, and I'm going to go in the next like couple weeks. So I am like super excited that I'll be able to like, yeah, I stood there, and this is what I think. So that's going to be exciting. So join us for that. We'll be looking forward to it. As ever, a reminder. This podcast is sponsored by medievalists.net. So the best way to support us, other than buying our individual books, Crazy Battle of Five Kings out now, is to join their Patreon at patreon.com/medievalists. And that is also the absolute best place to drop us a line, a complaint, a question for our next Q&A. So hope everybody had a great time. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
And I'll see you in London in a couple weeks.
Woo-hoo! London, here I come. Bye, everybody.
Bye.